okay? Wave or type yes. Yeah, great. Thanks, Morris.
And I hear.
Okay, so I've got Grant with me today.
Got it, everybody.
So this is the sort of new format for the webinars. They're going to be short and sweet, and we'll aim to finish by 2. This particular webinar is all about measurements of smoking cessation and stop smoking services. So measurement of outcomes, essentially. Linda, if you can't hear, maybe your microphone, your speaker's off. Yeah, cool, thanks. If you've got questions throughout, it'd be great if you can just type them into the web chat so everyone else can see them, and Grant will just stop as we go through.
Help.
Okay, so we'll crack on. So first, I'm going to start with the current requirements, just so we're all on the same page here. So as you know, for each service user who sets a target quit date, the stop smoking services are required to provide an outcome at 4 weeks. That's the main measurement that the Ministry of Health requires. Okay, so it's for all those that set a target quit date. 4 weeks later, you're required to measure the outcome at 4 weeks. Now, that's not to say that you don't measure for longer. So in the Counties Manukau service, for example, that we'd take at least measurement for a number at 3 months. Okay, if you can get to 12 months, that's even better because you're providing really robust data on outcome. But the ministry is only asking you to report at 4 weeks, and I'll say why in a minute. So longer term outcome, as I said, is not compulsory, nor does it mean that your service is required to see clients on an ongoing basis for this length of time. But you know, it's good practice to undertake some longer term follow-up.
So does that mean that the Ministry of Health wants services to only see clients for 4 weeks after their quit date?
That's a very good question, Grant. The answer to that is no. It's just a measurement time point. So your services should meet the needs of the clients that you're trying to help. And for many of our clients, they're going to need ongoing support past that 4 week mark.
Okay, and what about for clients who take much longer than 4 weeks to set a quit date?
That's okay, and I think this on this diagram shows this here. So the number of sessions that happen prior to the quit date vary quite a lot. Sometimes you've got people you see 1 week and they're ready to set a quit date the next. Many of my clients now, though, are way out here, and I might use a cut down then quit or a flexible quit date, which might be 4 weeks before they get around to setting a quit date.
And then another 4 weeks until their quit date.
Yeah,
so, right,
yeah.
Okay.
So it all hinges around the quit date, but your program might spend a bit more time in helping them make changes before they quit.
So one size doesn't fit all.
Yeah, exactly. So one size doesn't fit all. But once they've set their quit date, then your follow-up needs to be for 4 weeks after that. And as you know, what you're really measuring is not a single puff in the last 2 weeks at
Right.
okay. And to get it CO validated, the ministry requires that your CO reading is less than 10 parts per million. Okay, so if they say, haven't smoked at all, a single puff in that last 2 week period, and they've got a CO reading less than 10, then they would be a 4 week validated quitter.
And some services, they want much less than 10 parts per million.
Yeah, absolutely, and we'll come on to that in a minute. Okay. Now, if your service, let's say your service likes to see people for 6 months, which is great, perfect, then at your 6 month mark, 6 months after your target quit date, the outcome measure varies just a little bit, but you're taking a slightly longer period of time. So it's over the last 4 weeks, have you smoked at all? And they say no, and they have a CO reading of less than 10, then they would be, in that case, a 6 month CO validated quitter.
Okay. So what about people who, in the measurement period, so not a single puff in the last 2 weeks, 4 weeks past quit date, and they say, cross their heart, no, I haven't had a single puff,
Yeah.
but they blow more than 10 parts per million.
Yeah. Okay. So one, you might want to check why that high CO reading is. There may be another cause for it. So there might be that they've got some faulty gas heating, or something like that. So you could do the change your monitor, check your monitor, so on and so forth. But if you've done all of that and their CO reading's still 15, then you could record them as a self-reported quitter, but they wouldn't be a CO validated quitter because that CO is way above the cutoff.
So if they're telling you that they haven't had a single puff, no, absolutely, here's the Holy Bible, I haven't had a tough, but, but they're blowing a 15, so they're a
self-reported 4-week quitter. Yeah. Okay, so as you all know, this is the question that you're at 4 weeks that you ask. So at 4 weeks after the quit day, you'd ask, over the last 2 weeks, have you smoked at all? Okay, they say no, not a single puff. Then that automatically qualifies them as self-reported abstainers or quitters. Okay? Everything else doesn't count. They'd be considered smoking. Okay. Once you've got someone that said, yep, haven't had a single puff, that's when you do your CO reading. And as I said, if your CO reading is less than 10 and they report not having a single puff, they are validated abstainers or quitters. Okay. Those who have just a few puffs or 1 to 5 cigarettes or more, regardless of what their breath test is, they are smokers.
Okay. Yep.
Now, what do you do if you can't actually exactly on the date that you've set? It's not, because it's not always possible to do that, and I'll show you an example in a minute. So the follow-up should always be as close to the scheduled date as possible. And the ministry says, well, plus or minus 3 days is fine. So that sort of accounts for weekends. I bet you know many people that perhaps try and avoid you. And usually people that avoid you, often because they've relapsed, they feel embarrassed or they perceive that they've failed. But there are some service users who actually have a genuine reason for not replying, that they've been away on holiday, for example. So let's just have a look at an example here. So let's say that you had a client that set their target quit date on a Sunday, in this case, Sunday the 30th of September.
So you've already been working with them for 6 weeks, getting them ready.
Yeah, right, okay. And they said, Sunday's going to be my day. And you said, right, 30th is the date. Now, obviously, 4 weeks from the 30th is the 28th of October. Most of you probably don't work Sundays, and so you can't do an exact date, but you've got that plus or minus 3 day window, right? So you can't
do your CO validation with that client on a Sunday.
Yeah.
So you can't be there on the actual day required.
Yeah. But you could go 3 days either side. So you could do it on the 29th, 30th, and 31st, or you could go backwards all the way to the Thursday. So you could do it before or a little bit after. Okay. And if you're doing it on any of those days between the 25th and the 31st, that would be, and if they say, no, haven't smoked at all over the last, well, since the 14th, I'll better use the cursor, then, and they've got a CO reading less than 10, that'd be a validated 4 week window. Okay. Now, let's just pretend this person didn't turn up or couldn't turn up either anywhere between the 25th and 31st, and you actually saw them on the 14th.
So they've been on holidays.
They've been on holiday. Yeah, they've been on holiday. You might have seen them perhaps on the the week starting the 22nd, but they've been away for the last couple of weeks in Australia. Now, what do you do? Well, what you really need still to capture is their smoking status over the last 2 weeks. So if their 4 week follow-up should have been on the 28th, you'd want to check that they'd not smoked in those last 2 weeks.
They're the important 2 weeks.
They're the important 2 weeks, yeah.
Not a single puff.
Not a single puff. So if they go back and they say, yep, I haven't had a single puff over those 2 weeks, absolutely fine, then you'd count them as a self-reported quitter. Now, hopefully, you've got people coming back to see you here and they say, actually, I haven't smoked at all. I was on holiday, no problem at all. I haven't smoked at all since my quit date.
So over here now, we're over here.
Yeah.
So this is this person's target quit date.
Yep.
You couldn't see them on the 28th.
Yep.
But you finally caught up with them.
Yep.
Nearly 3 weeks later.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And they're telling you they haven't smoked at all
during this period.
No, they're saying I haven't smoked at all since I quit here. Not a single puff.
Great.
Over that whole time. And you go, that's brilliant. And their CO reading here on the 14th is 2. Do they count as a 4-week CO validated quitter?
Yes, they do.
They do, absolutely. So here, when you're following up people late, as long as they say they've not smoked over that, that whole period, and they've got a CO reading still less than 10, you'd count them as a 4-week CO validated quitter. The problem comes as they say, well, you know what? I did really well. Actually, those last 2 weeks that from the 28th, I did really well, but I slipped on the 7th of November. And I smoked a whole packet. In fact, I'm still smoking the odd cigarette now. You do their CO reading, it's 12. Then they could still self-report as a 4-week quitter because they're telling you they haven't smoked here, but you couldn't CO validate them.
Right, yeah, okay. I get that.
Okay. So I hope that's clear. And the same questions used at the longest follow-up, but again, instead of over the past 2 weeks, you're asking over the past 4 weeks. Okay, so if you're using your longest follow-up, that's the one that you'd measure. So something that people always ask me is, well, why doesn't the ministry dictate longer-term follow-up? If you're saying 1 year is better, why don't you do 1 year? Well, 1 year success rates would be absolutely ideal. But it takes a long time to do the follow-up, obviously. 1 year from your quit date is a long time ago. And that takes a bit of resource for you to do. You're ringing all these people, you're trying to get them to come in. Trying to find them. Yeah, they've changed numbers in the meantime, and it becomes a really tough task. And so that's why one of the reasons for just doing it short term is that you're more likely to get people in, and you're more likely to get an idea of actually what your true quit rates are. I think if you can do it on a sample, that's really good. Just take I don't know, for the month of October or something, we'll try and follow everyone up. And it's just a discrete small sample. And that might give you an estimate of your service quit rate. But in general, we can estimate what the 1 year quit rates would be from our 4-week CO validated quit rate. So
is there a formula for how to do that?
There's an estimation. So we know that around 70% of people that are quit at 4 weeks will relapse over the next 11 months. So they'll be back smoking by a year. So let's say that your service gets a 50% 4-week CO validated quit rate. Okay. We'd estimate then that 70% will relapse, which would leave you with a 15% 1 year quit rate. Okay, and we know, unfortunately, that another third will go on to relapse at some stage in the future, leaving you with a 10% permanent quit rate.
So that means that if the service has 100 people that they work with to help them stop smoking, out of those 100 people, at the end of 4 weeks, half of them will be smoke-free and CO validated. And then after 12 months, out of those 100 people, 15 of them will be smoke-free. Right, okay. That's quite low, isn't it?
It is quite low, but I think you've got to remember that actually out of 100 people that quit without any support, 3 would be smoke-free.
Right, okay.
So 3 to 15, it's good enough for me, I reckon.
And so with the Ministry of Health, so all of these validating quit rates and sending all this information to the ministry about services and practitioners' results. What does the ministry do with this information?
So that's a good question, but it's used as a bit of a benchmark for measuring the success, an aspect of success of services. Of course, services are doing much more, and ideally we'd be measuring more of what services are doing. So in our Counties Manukau service, we also make sure pregnant women have a midwife. We also make sure that pregnant women have safe sleeping devices. We also screen for alcohol use. but none of that's of course measured by the ministry. That's something that we're doing. So this is just one of many potential measures.
And this figure here.
Yeah.
So if, say, a particular service was only getting 20%,
yeah,
would the ministry discipline that service? Or?
Well, I don't think it's so much about disciplinary action, but saying actually what's going on, what's not going right, and equally, if you're getting quit rates of 80%, you'd want to go in and say, well, what is it, and how are you getting 80%? That's a very good quit rate, and I'd want to know how you're doing that.
Right. Okay.
Right? So it's sort of each end of the spectrum. It would be not telling people off or not believing them, but actually going to find out what's working really well and what's the secret.
Yeah. And so does the ministry feed back to services and practitioners?
Well, the ministry feeds back on a quarterly basis with the Regional Tobacco Integration Network. So you'll see your results being fed back to you.
Right.
Now, we just talked about this carbon monoxide cutoff, Grant, you mentioned it, and currently the ministry stipulates a cutoff of, it has to be less than 10 parts per million.
When you say cutoff, what do you mean by that?
So that's the number on your CO monitor, that below that would be, you could say it's a validated quitter, above that would not be, okay? But you mentioned that many services were using lower figures, and we certainly do as well. And there's some research published a few years ago now, but really to confirm, not smoking in the last 24 hours, you need to really have a cutoff of 5. So it would be 4 or under that you'd be absolutely sure they'd not smoked in the last 24 hours. And I know many services that do incentive schemes do exactly that.
Yeah. We had a quick coach who came in to borrow our CO monitor a while back because hers wasn't working properly, and she tested it on her husband at home that evening, who was a lifetime never smoker, and he blew a 70 because his office was above a warehouse with 4 petrol-driven forklifts driving 24 hours a day, and he blew 70 just from exhaust fumes from underneath his office.
Yeah. So sometimes when you've got very concentrated spaces, absolutely. Okay, so just a quick few examples here. And what I've got here in these examples are scheduled follow-up based on the quit date here. So that's the schedule, so that's where they should have been. This is where they were actually done. And you can see here it's pretty close. This one is 1 day late, but that's acceptable. And then smoking status.
So those dates there are the dates that a practitioner would have met with this client.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. Okay. So what would this case be? What would you consider this case to be in terms of smoking outcomes?
So target quit date is here.
Yep.
So the smoking daily is over 10 parts per minute.
So he's definitely a smoker
so
there.
Definitely smoking.
Yep.
Week 1 is down to 5.
Yep.
So he's reducing his CO.
Yep.
Down to just a few puffs.
Yep.
The second week, the third week, which is the target week, the 2 weeks in here,
yep.
post quit date,
yep.
not a single puff,
yep.
but he couldn't get a CO reading
yep.
for whatever reason. So this smoker would be counted as self-reported quit.
Perfect. Yep.
Yeah, but
yep.
not CO validated.
Exactly, a self-reported 4-week quitter or 4-week abstainer. Yeah. Okay. What about this one? So again, very similar dates. Was doing really well after his quit date and got down to the last week and it slipped. He'd just had a few puffs of a single cigarette. And it has a non-smoking CO reading.
So his quit date is here.
Yep.
All of us, so the 2 weeks we're interested in.
Yep.
Is these 2.
Yep.
So he's definitely not smoking there.
Yep.
But he's self-reported he's had a few puffs.
Yep.
So he would be a he hasn't succeeded.
Yeah, that's right. At least at this time point.
Yeah.
So, he might get back on track, but just for the measurement, he'd be a smoker at that 4-week mark.
Even though he's just had a few puffs.
Even though he's had a few puffs. Yeah. Strict, unfair, but in some cases, but it's just for the purpose of measurement. You would never tell this guy you're a failure, right? You wouldn't say, oh no, you failed, I have to tick you down as that's not the purpose of this. This is just as like a ruler to measure something. Okay, here's someone that you're all on track, and then your 4-week follow-up is 2 weeks late. Okay, but you've asked, actually this little asterisk here, and this is the way I asked you, since I last saw you, have you had a single puff? And he's come back and he's actually 6 weeks now, because he's 2 weeks late here. And I said, have you had a single puff since I last seen you? And he said, absolutely nothing, nothing at all. And he blew a 3. Does he get counted as a 4-week CO validated quitter?
Yes, he does.
He does, absolutely. He's actually a 6-week CO validated quitter, but sorry, that should say validated on this one. My apologies. So he meets that mark. What about this person here? Again, pretty much on time up until the last one, which is 1 week late. Okay. And so this one, it says, well, actually, since your last session, which was on the 5th, have you had a single puff? And they say no, but at week 3, they report smoking 1 to 5 cigarettes. Is this a 4-week CO validated quitter?
No.
No, because the 2-week mark, they were smoking. Absolutely.
So, and that's the crucial point, is in one of those 2-week periods here, he's had 5 cigarettes.
Yeah, or somewhere between that.
Self-reported smoking.
Self-reported smoking, yeah, absolutely. Now, in terms of calculating quit rates, I think you all know how to do that, but of course it's, for self-report, you just don't have a CO validation. Thanks, Grant. So you take your number of clients who've set a quit date and not smoked a single puff over the last 2 weeks at 4-week follow-up, divided by the number of clients that set a quit date, multiplied by 100, and you get a quit rate.
Your quit rate as a practitioner, or your services quit rate.
Well, that would give you your services quit rate, but you can do this yourself out of all of your clients. Okay. Yeah. And when it's CO validated, of course, you're talking about those that report not smoking and have a CO reading less than 10. The goals, the UK guidance suggests that 4 weeks CO validated quit rate should generally be above 40%. Our Ministry of Health set a goal of more than 50%. So you can see that actually if you're doing more than 50%, you're doing really well, which is brilliant. If you just want to benchmark self-reported quit rates, then generally that should be above 50% as well. So if you're doing that with self-report, again, your service is doing well. And if you do measure your 52-week, your 1-year quit rates, again, around 15% would be really good.
So does the ministry require?
I mean, that's a goal.
It's a goal.
It's a goal. It's not an absolute requirement. And that's going to depend on the clients you're seeing as well. So they might be a bit lower in people with mental illness compared to others.
Okay.
And that is that.
Oh, what about services who are working a lot more now with people who aren't trying to quit, but they're trying to get off long-term NRT use, or they've been using a vape device for a number of years and now want help to stop. Do those people fall into?
Those people won't fall under those measures because they're not smoking. But you should record the work that you do with all of those clients in another way. I mean, you can still do a narrative report back to the ministry as well, but keep a record of those for your own purposes.
And there's been incidences too I've heard about where clients have refused to blow into CO monitors to have their quit status validated? What's your advice if that occurs?
Well, I think you don't need to challenge it or tell them off. You just, if they say they haven't smoked, they'd be included as a self-reported quitter. Just can't CO validate them.
Okay, and my final question before we hand over would be, what about people who you've worked with and then they've set a quit date, maybe in 2 weeks' time, and you never see them again? No matter how hard you try, they're lost.
Yeah, it's difficult, and sometimes there might be a valid reason for this. You know, they've just shifted or they've changed their phone number, or and you can't do much about that. But you know, we always try and follow people up as much as we can.
So you have to report those people as still smoking?
If they've set a quit date, they'd be reported as lost to follow up, but they'd be reported as, you know, they form part of your calculation of your quit rate.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions from anyone? And don't forget to unmute.
I think, can you unmute everyone, Sue? Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Because you've got you've typed in.
It doesn't sound familiar.
Seen him back in 2012.
Oh, Kate.
Okay. Any questions from anyone?
Any questions? No, but my head.
We've recorded this, so we'll put it on the website in the next couple of weeks, so it's there if you need it. And I'll also ask Sue just to send out something that was written when these new services all started, which will summarise what we've talked about today. Okay, if that's it, we'll let you know when the next webinar is. Again, don't feel free to email me with any suggestions you want to talk about, and we'll try and keep these short, sweet, and clinically relevant for you.
Goodbye, everyone.
See you.